Okay. Okay, so good morning to everybody who's just joined us. Very warm welcome. We'll just wait a couple of minutes for a few more people join, and then we'll get started. Okay. One more minute. Okay.
Unmute yourself, Mark, please.
Yeah, done.
Thanks.
Okay. Very warm welcome to everybody who's joined us. We'll just wait another minute or so, and then we'll get started. Hope everybody's well. I'm back from the summer holidays. Okay. Okay. All right, there's a few more people to let in, and then we'll get started. Okay. Right. Okay. So, hello and welcome to the Callisto Grand Credit Clinic. We're going to prescribe the perfect treatment for your working capital and working together. So it's been a couple of months since our last get together, so we're back with a bang. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping points. Today's session will be recorded for CPD accreditation, and also anybody who wants to watch this again, the video will be available in a few days. Only for members. You'll be in our members portal, and you're very welcome to join Callisto Grand membership. This event today will be interactive, so please share your thoughts and your comments through the chat and indeed through conversation. Richard will introduce Invivo and the data sharing platform for around 20 to 30 minutes, and then the rest of the session is an open forum. I've been meeting with Invivo in the UK and online for a few months now, discussing our partnership and learning more about the products. And today, I'm sure you're in for a treat. It's something very different. And you'll be able to meet Richard and his team at the Credit Matters Conference in Prague, which is now only 6 weeks away, and there are a few places remaining. For those of you who are regulars with the Credit Clinic, you know that it wouldn't be the same without a few terrible medical kind of puns. So here goes. So Richard Morton from Invivo, your financial specialist for today's session, will discuss the latest in cutting-edge treatment, virtual data sharing platforms. These platforms are about to revolutionize the way we diagnose and treat common credit management ailments, ensuring a strong, healthy financial system. Yeah, that wasn't too terrible. Okay, so as I said, I've known our guest today for quite a few years, and I'm delighted to welcome Richard Morton, the founder and CEO of Invivo. So, Richard, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mark. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow that introduction. I'm trying to think of something witty to say about a medical pun, but I can't. Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Looking forward to having this interactive session with you all today. And really just to talk through the main subject today, which is around virtual data sharing. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Rich Morton. I am the CEO at Invivo. I'm here today to talk to you about how data sharing platforms are about to change the way that users collaborate throughout the customer engagement lifecycle by improving communications, removing friction, and creating a seamless exchange of data that drives cash performance. As we go through the session today, we'll explain a little bit more about the technology that sits behind it without being too techy, and really just talking about the benefits and the values that this can give to your customers and to your internal users as well. So I'm going to touch initially on credit management and brand identity because it's a really important part of what we do in the credit and back office teams. So when a customer's bought from your company, they have engaged with your brand and they have entered the customer engagement life cycle. This basically means that every interaction that they now have from sales to payment should be aligned with your brand identity and values. Back office, as we know, engages with the customer many more times than front office. And naturally, there's been a significant increase in investment to automate processes and drive operational efficiencies. It is this behind the scenes contact that impacts on customer satisfaction levels that is severely underestimated, as it's often not measured and becomes a blind spot. More often than not, this engagement is reactive due to something that's gone wrong, such as a failure to pay or dispute. What we've been looking at in Vivo is customer centricity and how to build stronger customer relationships. The customer is central to everything that we do, but how do we strike the balance between efficiency and the customer experience? AR teams have key financial performance metrics that need to be hit every month. Cash performance, DSO, dispute resolution, among just a few, but often the customer experience becomes secondary. However, any credit professional will tell you that building a strong customer relationship is crucial to being able to have that difficult conversation when it's necessary. And that again takes us back to that customer engagement life cycle, when we're looking at how we're actually optimizing our financial performance through our credit and collections processes, whilst maintaining that very strong customer relationship. And how do we achieve that perfect balance of cash performance and working capital, and maintaining a very positive relationship with your customer throughout that customer life cycle and that engagement life cycle. So I'm going to go into some sort of key metrics, so things that don't necessarily get considered in credit management, but things that are really crucial to the way that we actually look at what we do and how we work alongside our partners in sales and marketing, and how we actually create that great user experience. So we talk about customer retention and receivables performance. Cash performance is critical to maintaining working capital. That's absolutely goes without being said. However, remember, you are a huge part of that customer engagement life cycle, and the customer experience is what enables your company to retain and grow sales with a loyal customer base. When you're setting your collection strategies, then consider some of these key business statistics. More and more so, cost of acquisition. Cost of acquisition is 5 to 25 times higher than keeping an existing customer. That's because the cost of digital marketing, the cost of actually acquiring a new customer just increasingly becomes more and more difficult, increasingly becomes more and more expensive. So customer retention takes a bigger emphasis. So increasing customer retention or improving brand loyalty can increase sales and profits for your organization by up to 70%. Now, the reason why we're talking about these statistics is we're talking about that engagement with the customer. We're talking about how you communicate and share information, how you communicate and how you share information with your customer, so that you can make it as seamless and frictionless as possible and as real time as possible as well, because these are the things that are important to your customers. Customer lifetime value. A customer lifetime value is increased through cross-selling, customer care, and brand loyalty. Again, those engagement touch points that you have with your customer have to be positive. They have to come in from a place where they see you as a world-class business and they see you as a world-class team. And you can only do that through providing them with a great experience and providing them with the information that's on time and accurate, and giving them the tools to be able to communicate with you effectively. So when you think credit, think customer engagement, think customer loyalty alongside working capital, then your language becomes the language of your brand. So what are the overall objectives of credit managers? So I'm going to touch on this a little bit. I used a little bit of ChatGPT. So it was quite interesting when ChatGPT verified quite a few things that we've all been talking about, but this is the sort of information that now is readily available to anybody that's really interested in what are our overall objectives. And sometimes we have to kind of have a little bit of a reset, and we have to understand what is our purposes. I know we've got our KPIs, I know we've got our working capital, but we take that down a layer and say, what are the things that are driving the credit department, the risk departments, that whole back office function? assessing creditworthiness, evaluating the financial stability and creditworthiness of current and potential customers, analyzing financial statements, credit reports, and payment histories to determine credit limits and terms. We've now got lots of tools that are helping us do that. We're also using AI that's helping us drive these decisions and making that more efficient in a way that we're making decisions around the customer's creditworthiness. But there's still that element of expertise that comes from that credit manager to assess that information, because you don't always have all of the information that you need to make that credit decision. So you're using your experience as well as the data that's been made available to you and the policies that you're working with to make those decisions around assessing that creditworthiness. Minimizing credit risk, reducing the risk of bad debts and defaults whilst maintaining profitable customer relationships, implementing credit policies and setting credit limits. Optimizing cash flow, of course, ensure timely collection of receivables to maintain a healthy cash flow for the organization, monitoring accounts receivables, managing collection processes, and working with customers on payment plans and adjustments. Again, it comes back to that customer engagement. How are we engaging with the customer? How they perceive us as a support mechanism to help them manage their account with you more effectively. Setting and enforcing credit policies. Developing and implementing credit policies that align with the organizational financial goals and risk tolerance. Are we in a period of hyper sales growth? Are we in a period of some financial instability, economic instability? These are very key things that are driving policies and making decisions around how you're managing your receivables and how you're setting your credit policies. Establishing procedures for credit applications, approvals, and training staff on credit management practices. Managing the credit portfolio, maintain a balanced and profitable credit portfolio that supports the company's financial stability. Regularly reviewing credit accounts, identifying potential issues early, and making adjustments to credit strategies. Supporting sales and growth. Again, it's a big one. Facilitating business growth by supporting sales efforts with sound credit decisions that maximize revenue without compromising risk. Collaborating with the sales team to structure deals that are financially viable and beneficial for both the company and the customer. Again, becoming an integral part of the company's sales growth and the decisions that are helping the sales team to win new business. Compliance and reporting, handling disputes and negotiations, and also training and development. Develop the credit management team's skills and knowledge to improve performance and ensure consistency in credit decisions, providing training on credit analysis, risk assessment, and customer relationships. And last but not least, as I've mentioned before, monitoring market and economic conditions. Many of you will work across multiple territories, multiple regions, so staying informed about market trends and economic conditions that can impact the company's credit risk profile. Adjusting policies and strategies in response to changes in the economic environment and industry-specific risks. So they're just some of the objectives that are being asked of credit managers in this modern world. And therefore, we're now looking at the tools and we're looking at the processes and we're looking at the policies of how we can actually manage this entire end-to-end process, which touches on every single part of the customer engagement and touches on many, many different departments within your own organization. So it's a massive role and it's a key role. And one of those big roles is that communication, the ability to share information and the ability to share that information quickly and accurately at the convenience of the users that you're communicating with, your internal users and your external customers. And this is where virtual data sharing will come in. So I'm just going to talk about some pain points and frustrations of a credit manager. So balancing risk and sales objectives and that conflict of interests. Credit managers are balancing the need to minimize credit risk with the company's desire to increase sales. This can create tension with the sales teams who may push for extending credit to marginal customers. There is often pressure from senior management to approve credit to achieve revenue targets, even when the creditworthiness of the customer is questionable. We'll all know when those conversations are happening, when we're being asked to maybe approve a credit limit, we might just have a fully automated process, and that's also great. But quite often that automated process will still get challenged and will be challenged around the credit limits that are being assigned to customers, the risk that's being taken in terms of the risk of default and late payment, and how you strike that balance between supporting sales growth and also maintaining a healthy portfolio and credit risk. Collection challenges. Managing and chasing overdue payments can be frustrating and resource intensive, often involving difficult conversations with customers. Clearly, we've seen a big progression in the collection tools that are now available to the market, but that should be really your base point for managing your portfolio. So disputes over invoices or payment terms can delay collections and strain customer relationships. Lots of regulatory compliance requirements now, which is growing and growing. Regulatory burdens, credit managers have to ensure compliance and various regulations, data protection, anti-money laundering, GDPR. These are time-consuming and complex processes that we have to control. The risk of non-compliance is high and can potentially lead to fines and legal issues. So we have to get that right. And again, we'll lean in a little bit more into how data sharing is helping, or virtual data sharing is going to help you solve those problems. Managing that customer relationship that we talked about earlier. So really managing credit can sometimes lead to strained relationships with customers, especially when enforcing payment terms or refusing extended credit. And balancing those credit policies with customer retention can be difficult, as overly strict credit terms can drive customers away, create that conflict with your sales team. And again, just striking that balance is a very, very difficult thing to do. Economic factors, downturns in industry-specific downturns can increase the risk of defaults, making the job of a credit manager more challenging. We can see from the UK, we've had a downturn, hyperinflation. That's impacted on a lot of businesses still struggling to come out of those sort of challenging conditions. So again, those economic factors are constantly being evaluated. You need the ability to be able to be agile, change your processes, and again, make sure that you have that constant engagement with your customers. And that comes at a cost unless you have the right tools. Internal communications is massive. Ensuring effective communications and coordination with other departments such as sales, finance, customer services can be very, very difficult. You need to be aligned. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how virtual data sharing can help support those internal communications that you have with your colleagues in other departments. And then going through all of those performance metrics, KPIs that are being asked from a top level every single month, DSO, bad debt ratios, collection efficiencies, productivities, all of the key things that we're looking at in driving those financial metrics, whilst balancing out the desire for the business to grow, create more sales, while minimizing risk. So this will shift company priorities that can lead to changing targets, making it difficult to maintain consistency in credit management practices. So technology tools. Many credit managers are frustrated by outdated and inefficient credit management software. This can hinder your ability to effectively monitor credit risk and collections. Integration issues with other systems, such as your CRMs, your ERPs, your credit data providers, your DCAs, your law firms. That's all data integrations. This can be quite challenging, especially whilst changing ERP systems, your suppliers are changing systems. There's a constant ebb and flow, a constant requirement to ensure that data is kept up to date and accurate. And this is where data sharing or virtual data sharing can help solve those problems. So what are we looking for in technology? What are the things that we need as a minimum base point from a technology provider? We need consistency, reliability, and predictability. Every credit manager will say these are the three key things that you need to be able to manage your policies and processes. You want automations, you need the controls, you need visibility. So just some key things that we've picked out for this talk today. Scheduled workflows that can be set up to regulate your credit policies. Just the very, very minimum in terms of being able to set all of your operational processes, configure them and set them on schedules so that you're adhering to your credit policies that you're setting for your organization. Then we go into more AI-driven, triggered, data-driven workflow decisioning, things that can be set up to respond to changing conditions across your customer portfolio. As data changes, we need evaluations. They would historically be done by humans. That's now automated. where you're making those decisions about that customer position and that customer financial status. So are you increasing credit? Are you reducing credit? Are you blocking orders? Are you creating a communication? Are you changing those credit limits based on some changing circumstances? All of which can be done through data-triggered workflow decisions that can be preset or run through AI systems. Data integrations that enable your customers to exchange data and documents quickly through their AP platforms. More and more customers are bringing in their own AP platforms, especially those key accounts. And again, the ability to be able to integrate, receive data, share data is becoming hyper important. Third-party integrations to the data and tools that support your credit function. Again, such as your credit data providers. How frequent can we get this flow of information coming into your portfolio? How are you using that information to make those key important decisions that are going to be impactful on that customer relationship? Portals to enable your customers to log in and review their account and to make payments. We'll go into that a little bit more in terms of providing your customer portals. I'm sure many of you do, but again, what you're doing is you're providing a one-to-one relationship connection with your customer. They have many, many suppliers that they face on a daily basis. User task prioritization. User task prioritization. Giving your users from all departments and all teams the data, the tools to collaborate, complete actions efficiently and effectively when manual actions are required. So again, having that to-do list is still very, very relevant. Having that prioritization of the key actions that need to be performed is going to be, and still is, and will continue to be, even with all the automations and AI, that human intervention, that human decision, and making sure those value actions are being done first. Business KPI tracking and performance, tracking the financial performance across your portfolio for senior management, so that strategic decisions can be made to drive continuous improvements. Looking across those financial metrics, and again, making sure that they're tracking and trending in the right way, and also being able to introduce your own metrics, the metrics that are important to you, ratios and averages and means and mediums and things like that, when you're looking at the types of metrics where you can start to determine whether the operational processes that you have are working. And if changes need to be made, and if they're working in certain parts of the business, not others, they're working in certain territories, but not others. All of this information needs to be surfaced. This information needs to be real time, and this information needs to be actionable, so that when you are viewing that information, you can change your processes so that you can affect change. That's critical. Customer KPI tracking and performance, obviously, access to the data that will support decision making and tracking your customer trends, such as payment behaviors, credit worthiness, and financial status. So this is where we start looking at things like cross-functional teams. I don't know if this is something that is a big subject, but we look at that a lot in Vivo, having cross-functional teams where we've got all participants, all users collaborating to be able to get the right outcome, but doing it in an efficient way so that when information is shared, that information doesn't fall into silos. You've probably seen many times, I've sent an email to user X, or I've made a phone call to user Y, or I messaged them on Teams, or I messaged them on Slack. There's so many different communication channels now. We end up with these siloed pieces of information, and we've still got to communicate to the customer. So then we're in a position where I've got multiple communication channels internally, then I've got my communication channels with my customer, and hey, they've got all of their communications with all of their users on their side as well. So you can see where information can take an age now, even in this digital age, to actually find its way to the right person, and making sure that's done in a quick and efficient way. And of course, we're overlaying AI tools across operations to create even more efficiency. But again, it's that flow of information. It's that source of truth, which is it's actually enabling an action or a decision to be made effectively and in a timely manner. So what are the next generation tools that we should start looking at? Enter now collaboration through data sharing platforms. So I'm going to just talk about that very, very briefly in the way that data sharing platforms can now transform the way that organizations are sharing information in a secure way, in a compliant way, and in a convenient way that enables their customers and their internal users to all collaborate to get to the right result. So companies and internal users are still relying on emails, spreadsheets, and Word documents, as well as all the other digital channels when communicating, which takes up to 50 to 60% of their time. Most email boxes now are full of unread and unactioned emails. There has just been an explosion of emails going into people's inboxes. Those emails quite often now are being missed because there's just so many communications flying around. It's the #1 channel for communications. So it's now becoming almost ineffective. If 80% of your customers account for 20% of your revenue, Pareto's law, then imagine how many suppliers are emailing your customers every single day. These companies have hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers. So statistically, it's impossible for them to click on every single supplier portal. Only a small percentage of vendors have their own vendor portals, and all they're doing is simply changing the axis, which is from them logging into your portal to you logging into theirs. So the weight of manual actions is still there. You might have built integrations with these portals, but there's only a small percentage of your customers that will be using these. You've still got the big percentage of your customers that are being communicated to via emails and via your one-to-one customer portal. So at Invivo, we had to think about this and we thought, well, what's better than a one-to-one? What's better than one business communicating to one customer? I've got hundreds of suppliers. If I have to click on every single customer and supplier portal, I wouldn't have time to do that. So then we thought, what's better than one-to-one? It's one-to-many. And then what's better than one-to-many? It's many-to-many. This is where things like social media platforms have really led the way. They've led the way in the way that people are communicating in the convenience of their own environment, their own tenancy, their own workspace, but with information that's being shared with them. I'm just going to explain how that works. So we're soon going to see the next generation of platforms that enable virtualized data sharing. So the technology now exists to support virtualized data sharing, enabling companies to securely share their AR ledger with customers, users who operate within the same data sharing platform. So rather than customer, supplier to portal to customer, it's entity communicating with entity. That entity can communicate to as many entities as they want to or need to, and so can entity A. So supplier and customer all operate within data sharing. The difference between this, and it's a technical difference, is that this data is virtualized. It means that you're no longer transferring information, you're no longer emailing information, you are giving a virtual view of data securely to another party. And that party is updating and working on the same piece of data that's being shared with them. So these companies will be able to manage all of their suppliers and customers in one virtualized network environment, so that all data is instant, no data is transferred between organizations, and users can work within the convenience of their own environment, their own workspace, with a virtual view of data that they have been given access to. You can be given access to multiple virtual data sets, which then are materialized in your own workspace, which then enable you to communicate to multiple vendors and multiple suppliers in one convenient place. Now, through virtual data sharing, this also enables you to give access to that information to your own internal teams as well. So every single business has its own workspace and can share data seamlessly with any other participant or any other trading partner they've got within the network. This is going to create a new era in a way that we will communicate and share data with AP teams, creating collaboration, visibility, and enhanced communications. That's the end of my presentation. Hopefully I covered it off in as much detail as you guys needed, but very happy to open that to the floor.
Okay, and thank you. Thanks very much for that, Richard. There was an awful lot to take in there, and I think this is incredibly exciting. Like you said, this virtualized data sharing is a big shift away from, so we say, more traditional ways that we've been communicating with our stakeholders, whether internal or external. To kick off with a question to you, Richard. So what from the point of view of Invivo, what kind of trends and global events are having customers and interested businesses sort of knocking on your door?
I think it's very much about like that hyper-centric customer engagement. They're looking at how can we provide our customers with a better experience. I think customer experience is something that's been spoken about more and more and more, particularly in credit. It's not just about like chasing payments, getting the money in. It's very much about we're working in a very competitive, our clients work in very competitive sectors. They want to be seen to be thought leaders. They want to be seen to be able to give their customers a great user experience. So we're seeing more and more of that. That kind of, clearly AI is a massive topic. It's a hot topic, and harnessing that across your platforms and creating more convenience and efficiency. But we're definitely seeing this movement towards this hypercentric customer experience. And I think it's something that's really cool, because sales and marketing have always talked about, the customer engagement cycle, customer success. And I think this is now emanating through to other teams, because it is a collaboration. That customer engagement, that customer retention is a complete collaboration across all teams and all departments. And we're seeing more and more of that, and we're seeing more emphasis being put on that customer engagement. Hence the reason for virtual data sharing.
And if I understand it correctly, when we're talking about virtualized data sharing, does this mean that customers, so do you send invoices to your customers and so on? Does this mean that they can directly notify the selling company, the credit control department, of if there's a dispute or if they're promising to make payments? So rather than send an email or whatever, they can enter the sharing and then really update kind of charts and so on from the selling point of view, so that like the treasury can see and anybody else can see. That's kind of where we're going with this, yeah?
Yeah, so if I can explain that through like a use case. So I am a supplier. I have my users working on their workspaces there to do this. They're managing the collections of a particular portfolio. Every single one of those entities those customers can be given a virtualized view of their account. So that means that when I log into my Invivo account as a supplier, as a customer, I can sign up for that system, and then the system will then say, you have suppliers that want to share information with you. By accepting that invitation for them to share information with me, it's like a friend request, right? You have a friend who wants to connect with you. They can then give you a permission to view your account on their own system. And that's a virtualized view. So rather than having to send that information, or even rather than having to create a portal, you're essentially sharing their account with them on their Invivo system. By sharing that information virtually, what it means is that they can still view that information, they can create their own views of it, they can create their own dashboards, so that they have that information. They can connect that data back out to their own accounting system. So now you've got an exchange of information from ERP into your receivable system, your data sharing platform. There's then been a permission that's been given to the customer to view that information. They can then exchange that information back out to their own AP systems. Now, those two users, customer and supplier, are looking at a virtualized view of the same information, so that when the collector is updating, say, for example, piece of information, and you can lock down the permission of what information is seen, right? So you can say, you just get to see this invoice information, you get to see your key account information, and you can essentially just choose to share what you want, because it's done on a kind of dashboard view. And then on that dashboard view, I get to see that view. So it's, in essence, it's a permission, right? And it's a locked down permission. I can then, as I'm updating the same set of virtualized data that's being shared with me by my customer. So it's not even exchanging between systems, it's actually sharing the same updates between two entities. Now, the beauty of this is that on the customer side, they can then give access and permission to their own internal users to access that information. So again, when they log in, they can view an element of that. So there might be 1,000 suppliers sharing information with that customer. They can then start sharing that information out to their payables teams or the approval teams, etc. But again, it's all done through a virtualized view of that data. So therefore, when an update is made, you're updating one source of truth, as opposed to exchanging information via emails or via different systems. You're essentially virtualizing the same piece of information, so you do have that one source of truth. So when I say I'm going to make a payment, I'm updating a field that's being shared on two platforms to say I'm updating a payment, and that information is instantly made available to the supplier. Now, what's really critical here, Mark, is that when you're dealing with multiple sources, so multiple suppliers, multiple customers, you have to have a dynamic data set. Because if you imagine, there's certain data fields that apply to that particular customer that might not necessarily apply to another customer. So therefore, a dynamic data set enables you to have almost like a unique set of data per customer. You can have your core information, obviously, which is your billing information, your customer information, your credit limits. That's still obviously your standard fields. But every single customer can have almost like a dynamic set of unique fields that are relevant to them. So when you're communicating to them in their own language as well. So that's something that's really important. It's not something that can be done in a relational database. It's not something that can be done in a traditional in the sense of a traditional database. This has to be a virtualized dynamic database that enables that level of data sharing between, because it's a many-to-many relationship.
So I see what you mean. The parallel here with the social networks is one person does a post, and then other people can accept it, or they can be invited in as friends and so on to share that same core information, and that's how it sort of cascades through this kind of ecosystem.
Yeah, very similar sort of technology in the way that you've just described there, Mark. But it's a little bit more locked down in that, because it's that permission structure, whereas you're not kind of sort of publishing a piece of information, you are sharing a piece of information. But it's the same concept in terms of being able to communicate. I'm in my Facebook site. I don't use Facebook, but if I did, I sat on I'm too old for Facebook, but I sit on Facebook and I've got all of my contacts, and someone else is sat on their Facebook site, but you're all sat on your own environment. And then it's my connections, my friends that I'm communicating to. Well, they're my suppliers. So I'm communicating to my suppliers, and as they're making updates, I'm seeing the updates from them, but I'm seeing them in my environment. So we're sharing information, and then I can just communicate directly back to that one friend or supplier, and now I've got a locked relationship with that supplier. But I'm sat in my own Facebook page, and that's how this technology is working.
And I think, what, from a practical point of view, like I say, a customer will say, I'm making this payment on the 14th of September, and then that information can go through to all sorts of different people that you invite into this ecosystem. Yeah, so that could
absolutely, because it's your site, right? Yeah. So it's your site, and this is the difference. This is the slight nuance between social media sites. Is as a social media user, I'm an individual, whereas when you're dealing with a business, that's a group of people. So therefore, that group of people then sit on the other side of that relationship. So obviously, you then have to have that additional layer of permissions so that different users within your organization get access to see the information that's important to them. So you can even take that right the way back into, who was the salesperson. They get to see information about the payables, or the procurement person, so rather than the salesperson. They can see information about that kind of payables relationship they've got with their supplier. So you can actually provide, whereas you've got social media user, it's now teams of people and individuals who have access to pieces of information on both sides. And that's what creates this consistency and convenience for users, because they've got all the information they need about multiple relationships in one convenient workspace.
So you said one source of truth. So it's once it's entered once, it's not up for interpretation. That's it. Yeah, it's
correct.
That same
correct.
flows through wherever you want it to flow through to. Okay.
Yeah.
Just going back a bit, and one of the hot topics, as always has been and probably always will be, is about sort of cost saving and so on. And you made a couple of really interesting points. You were saying about the cost of acquisition of a new client is somewhere between 5 and 25 times higher than keeping an existing client.
Yeah.
So in terms of cost, how does that manifest itself?
Yeah, so I think the relevancy there is the customer experience. If you're giving your customer a bad experience through the back office, they're dealing with you probably every day. And if they're having a difficult experience, or they're not getting the information that they need, or things are slow, or it's just a frustration. And that if you're dealing with that 80-20, you're going to be dealing with users that are quite influential within their own organization. And we want to make it as simple and easy as possible for them to be able to transact. So they might go through a fantastic onboarding journey. They might go through a fantastic procurement and buying journey. And then we want that journey to be as great, if not better, when they're going through that financial journey, that back office journey as well. So it's important that the investment and the recognition of that customer retention, and this is where I feel as though, these are really important metrics when we're talking about investing in technology in the back office, or investing in technology that's going to help drive efficiencies in customer engagement. That engagement is equally as important as that initial sales engagement. So where we start seeing statistics like it's up to 25 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to keep an existing one, I think that customer relationship takes on a very sort of important emphasis in the way that you're actually engaging with that customer.
Okay. And then following on from that, then you said also that increasing customer retention or improving brand loyalty increases sales and profits, could be up to 70%.
Yeah, these marketing statistics are well known. And again, being able to upsell or cross-sell to a customer is what is really driving revenue. Anyone that sort of runs a business, you run your own business, Mark, you'll know that your sales and your revenue increase quite often comes from your current customers. Your sales growth numbers on new customer acquisition is expensive and difficult to do. It's the same for any business, whether you're a multi-billion-pound business or an SME. So again, that brand loyalty and creating that customer engagement is super important. And that's why, as I say, we're seeing this movement towards this customer engagement life cycle and the importance of that customer centricity. So, the retention of a customer, a good experience, offers opportunities to cross-sell and upsell. And cross-selling and upselling is where much of the kind of revenue growth is, calculated and generated for organizations.
Okay. So and I agree with that. And I think we were saying before we kicked off how having a bad customer experience, you can very quickly lose customers, particularly in competitive worlds like freight industry or something like that. The customers will move from one one provider to another if they're not happy with the invoicing. So it's something that's kind of not really spoken about very much in it, but it is a substantial cost and impact on every company, and kind of your brand awareness is such a big thing these days, isn't it? And I always kind of find it odd that companies spend so much time sort of investing in quality control of their products, but not in quality control of their admin, right? And particularly invoicing, which is probably alongside the product is the most important thing and the most visible thing that customers see, and it represents the quality of the supplier company.
Every touch point is important. Every single engagement is important. Every single engagement is a representation of your brand. So whether it's a sales journey, or a credit control journey, or risk management journey, or whatever that is, that engagement has to represent the brand, and it has to give that customer a great user experience. And I think this is where sort of virtualized data sharing becomes really powerful, because you're working with your customer in the convenience of your customer. When you send a link to your customer, say, oh, please click on our portal, please pay us through our portal, what you're really asking your user to do is you do the work. Whereas in this, and then you sort of like the axis change, and you've got the enterprise companies that are using these AP platforms to say, well, you do the work, you come to our AP platform. But there isn't that kind of collaboration element where, with virtualized data sharing, everybody works within the convenience of their own systems. You don't need to go to someone else's system. I don't need to log into an AP platform. They don't need to log into my portal. We both have a view of the same information. We can both collaborate. We can both work at our own convenience. And again, what tools or what devices can we work on as well, particularly when you're talking to those SMEs within your organizational portfolio. Those SMEs, if you can give them a mobile experience as well, so that they can actually not only self-serve, but manage in their own environment, but also be able to do that on the devices that they've got immediate access to. That again gives a huge amount of benefit and convenience to your customers. So this is where I think virtualized data sharing is a new way of communicating. It's a more seamless, convenient way of communicating, and it's definitely, for me, just even as a consumer, when I have to log into 7 or 8 different supplier portals, it drives me crazy. I want that information to come to me, and I want that information in my workspace. I want to look at it at my convenience, and I can see that information, and I can communicate with my suppliers in one convenient place. And that is what virtualized data sharing is going to offer these businesses.
Yeah, I know the question of portals is always a vexed conversation with us. We've had a few sessions on it before, and it's not unusual for companies to have 40 or 50 different portals they have to negotiate every day, right? So I can see a lot of people are thinking, this is a real new way of going about it, and already we've had at least one person said they'd like to have a sneaky peeky, they said, at what it is we're describing this morning. So what kind of companies are actually coming to you, and who are you at? What kind of industries are you working with now?
Yeah, so it's the industries that have got, where we talk about the industries that have got sort of like a large customer base. You don't always get to have those direct communications with your customers. So again, maybe the only communication that they'll get from you is an email or an SMS, and that's impersonal now, because there's just so many emails. My own inbox is almost like, just every day I'm deleting about 90% of the emails that get sent to me because it's just irrelevant to me. So it really is now an impersonal way of communicating with your customers. So, and again, portals, as you said, you're saying, well, come to a portal. Hey, we give you a great portal. If I've got 50 of those to navigate, I'm not going to do that either. So this is where, virtual data sharing is a way of providing convenience to these organizations to be able to manage their suppliers and even manage their own customers, right? Because it's a bi-directional, virtualized data sharing is bi-directional. You know, they can manage their suppliers, but they can also manage their customers in the same network. It's a network, it's an ecosystem. So we're seeing sort of the interest in this is very much from those organizations that are looking at customer centricity. They're understanding the difficulties that their customers have in managing, you know, multiple suppliers, and they want to be seen as being able to provide their customers with a new initiative. It doesn't cost their customers anything. You know, they get basically free technology as part of this, and I think that, you know, it's been able to give a bit of added value to your clients, which is pretty cool, because, you know, if you can give your clients a bit of technology that enables them to be more efficient, you know, saves them time. You know, if they're spending 50% of their time responding to emails and you're giving them a piece of technology that's actually going to virtually automate this process and make it a lot more convenient, then that's a very positive step towards, again, demonstrating that your customer engagement and their experience with you is highly important.
I'm sure a lot of people here are going, yeah, this sounds great, and it's interesting. They'd like to take it further. What is the on average, what's a typical kind of lead time from inquiry through to implementation to go live?
We can deploy Invivo systems now in minutes. I'm sure many suppliers can do that now. You know, I think the big driver or the big barrier to entry has always been implementation time. And I think you learn more from your failures than you do from your wins. And I think that the learnings have been taken from long implementation cycles, and making the whole experience config driven. Obviously, there's always the element of a data integration, but can you make that data integration as frictionless as possible? We went down the route of dynamic data, so yeah, there is no schema to match to anymore. You just put your data into the system, and it's there. It works. It's done through sort of like an entity framework, again, which supports virtualization. So removing that, you can set up a system, and again, for an enterprise company, you've got to go through your processes. You need to understand your data landscape. But in terms of the technology itself, we're using AI to build a lot of this stuff now. We're implementing UI AI to build workspaces for users based on different user roles. We have libraries. It can really, really speed this up. And what used to take months can take weeks. I think it can take days in the right circumstances. And it's particularly when you've got conflicting IT projects as well. So where you've got a conflicting IT project, say for example, you're doing an upgrade to HANA or something like that, you can't put your cash performance and your customer engagement on the back burner. It's something that is really important to maintain that consistent progression and good relationship with your customers, because you can lose customers. I've seen many companies lose customers during these migrations. So again, something like this is something that's quick to set up and very quick to see value from. And what we also say as well is that try before you buy. Try this technology, get a workspace, share it, drop some data into an Excel, build some processes, get your hands on it. This is something which we're big believers in at Invivo, because I've seen companies buy technology without even really seeing it. They've just gone through an RFI or an RFP, and they've not really seen. I think, Mark, you mentioned a statistic to me that 35% of implementations fail. That's a frightening statistic, and I think there has to be a slight change now in the way that we're buying technology. CRM systems, etc. They're all leading the way in terms of being able to sign up and start using that technology almost instantly. I think AR platforms need to follow the same route. I mean, we're definitely taking that route ourselves and making sure that we can put our product in the hands of our customers. They can see it, they can see what value it can deliver to them before they're starting to sort of sign 3 and 5 year long-term contracts and getting stuck in technology that doesn't work for them. I've seen that happen too much.
So you're saying it's possible then that like everybody here today, they could have a demo. They could actually put it in. They could try it with their own data for a few weeks and see how it really works before they actually commit to like you said, a longer term project.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know where to go with that. No, that's that is. I think that is a shift, though, isn't it? Like you said, in more traditional thinking, shall we say, it's RFIs, RFPs, and so on, and then it can be a long-term implementation as well. Whereas going down this route, it's something that can be done very relatively quickly. And also, it was interesting what you said, like the because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, oh, we probably can't do this for a couple of years because we are doing S4 HANA transitions and so on. And I think I'm right in saying that those two things can run parallel. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think like when you're trying things as well, look, even if it's something which, you know, you've got other IT time is just so restricted, right? And there's always conflicting priorities for IT teams. I understand that entirely, and this is the reason why I think it's important to, you know, at least get your hands on something, play with it, config it, change the way it's set up, make sure it works for you, make sure it works for your use case. So I think even if you can't actually, you know, fully go live for something, at least you can have something in your hands that you can demonstrate and go, this is how we want to work. This is how we want our customers to engage with us. This is the way that we can start driving that more customer-centric engagement through the back office. This is how we can start driving more working capital. I've got the tools. I can share a workspace with you, Mr. FD, and you can see this information about our portfolio performance, our receivables performance. Bang, I'm data sharing with my FD. So, you know, this is something which I believe should be the way that technology is being consumed. I don't believe in 9-month implementation. I've been involved in them, and it was one of the reasons why we built Invivo in the way that we did, because we just feel that you should be getting very quick time to value from this type of technology. And I think this is, for me, the way we want to deliver our technology into the hands of our customers. And a lot of the work that we do is around removing that friction and time. And, you know, that all comes from learnings. I think everyone's come from a place of long implementations, but we've, you know, I think that we've made significant strides to remove those pain points and making Invivo a more kind of a modern platform that companies can see benefit from.
Okay. Well, we're getting near the end now. It's so the hour has whizzed by. Just to kind of wrap up, then I think one thing I would say is you can meet Richard and the Invivo team at the Credit Matters conference in Prague in 6 weeks from now. If people want to talk to you now, Richard, how do they get hold of you?
Data sharing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, contact us at Invivo. Obviously, go onto the Invivo website, invivo.com. You can message me at richard@invivo.com as well. If you've got any questions, you can, or communicate via you, Mark, and you can pass that information through to us. Very happy to, like, obviously have further conversations, you know, with everyone on the call today.
Okay, all right. So is there so we're almost at the end, just a minute or so to go. Is there anything you want to add to wrap up, Rich, or anybody else indeed in the audience want to add anything? No. Okay, so it has been really interesting. Thanks for your time. I know we've had 2 or 3 sessions to put this together. A big thank you to everybody who's coming. Once again, we've had huge numbers. We were 75 at our peak a little while ago. So really, thank you everybody. Your attendance and putting yourselves out to join us means an awful lot to us. To Esther and the Callisto team as well. Thanks very much for organising everything again. So I guess we're back again in a week's time. We have another session in next week, and indeed the week after that as well. So it's busy on the wires for us in Callisto. In the meantime, Richard, once again, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. It's been brilliant.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Mark.
All right, and to everybody else, we'll see you soon. Take care, stay safe, God bless, and stay in touch. All the best. Thank you and goodbye.